The Chicago Bulls continue their offseason changes, this time moving on from head trainer Chip Schaefer. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, we're going to continue our player profiles, this time looking at Alex Caruso and Zack LaVine and Patrick Williams. We're going to get to all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. And so I wanted to start off with the Chicago Bulls. We know that this was an offseason where AK talked about changes, and so far, AK cannot make changes to the actual roster. He moved on from a couple of assistant coaches on Billy Donovan's staff. And now we have further changes coming, and this time the director of performance health, also known as the head athletic trainer, Chip Schaefer, has parted ways with the Chicago Bulls. This is a guy who was around during the dynasty era as well with Phil Jackson. He returned to the team in 2016, and he's been the head athletic trainer. He's been the with that said, and it is what it is, right? This is not something that I look at and saying this is any type of major change. I know people are going to kind of make it more than what it is. But make no mistake about it, a trainer does have an impact on the roster, right? Helping coming out with training, routines and, get players, to weight, put on weight, coming up with those things. He definitely helps with that. Todd Campbell is going to move into that director of performance health now position and head athletic trainer as well. And, Schaefer was respected around the league for sure. He was kept on in 2020 with Arturas Karnisovas, came on and replaced John Paxson, again, with his, his history of being here with the Bulls already as well. And this is, it's going to be definitely a change for the Chicago Bulls. And, the way that I look at it, and we talked a little bit about this over on Locked On Bulls as well, is that I think AK right now is in evaluation mode. He's looking at every aspect of the team that he can control, right? And so, Billy Donovan probably sat down, looked at some trainers, getting some new eyes on the back end of the bench. The lead assistant role still isn't hired as yet or filled as of yet. And while Schaefer, in his second stint with the Bulls, when he rejoined in the 2016-17 season, has seen a number of injuries come through and players that have needed a recap rehab from that and things like that. But, at the end of the day, I do think that, it's going to be an offseason where AK looks at everything. And I think that that's really what he wants to do. Now, AK, for his credit, has already said, I feel really good about the front office. By me sitting here and saying we need to make changes and improve, I think they're all going to work extremely hard, and I have total confidence in them coming up and being creative. So, that's the front office. But in reviewing everything in a franchise, you want to really kind of see which way do you want to go? Where are some areas that, that you can help, or kind of a change of eyes, a change of scenery, some new faces on the situation can really help. And I really think that that's what this is. It's just AK looking at something and saying, hey, you've been here for a while, maybe a new set of eyes can help our players stay a little bit healthier, can get our players back to training, now pairing with the player development department as well. And that just kind of is what it is when it comes down to it. We'll see the largest of impact if we have a healthier season from the Chicago Bulls. I know a lot of Bulls fans are going to say, hey, it was that new trainer. And not to say they'll be wrong with that, but we'll end up seeing what happens with that. But, outside of that, this is still an offseason where, AK still has a lot of things ahead of him, right? And we know that. And evaluating this roster is going to be difficult. We've talked about how close this Bulls team is up to the luxury tax, because they are extremely close to that. And so, whatever wiggle room that they can find, right? We've even got some reports from the Chicago Sun-Times that Arturas Karnisovas may actually look to move on from Nikola Vucevic, saying this. There's been growing speculation that the Bulls also might explore the trade market for center Nikola Vucevic, but it will be difficult to move him because his type of middle-class contract, $20 million, is becoming extinct with the new labor deal. And so they're not even necessarily in this saying anything about Nikola Vucevic's performance. Right now, the contract, I don't think moving a $20 million deal would be hard, but it's the player that you're also moving in that. And that is something that comes out of this article that, I have been saying for a while there. It's going to be difficult to move Nikola Vucevic. But if this front office is truly exploring the avenues to that, maybe that means that they take an L. And the thing is how many L's can you take in moves? Because when it comes down to the Zack LaVine trade, right? What we've heard from the market does seem like up until this point, that the Bulls are going to have to take an L in that type of deal as far as not really getting back the type of contract you could have, or the type of player you could have gotten a couple of years ago for moving Zack LaVine. And, that's something that AK has to work out, right? There's a lot of contract decisions that need to be made here. DeMar DeRozan, Patrick Williams, what are you going to do with their futures? Can you find a trade partner for Zack LaVine? And now also hearing that they are looking at, they're considering exploring the trade market for Nikola Vucevic, that would tell me a couple of things. That kind of indicates to me that the Bulls are definitely going to be looking at a center in this draft, right? Or unless they plan on getting a center back. Because, while Andre Drummond performed valiantly in his stint starting as center when Vooch went down, you're still going to need some depth there. And Adama Sanogo, listen, I love Adama. I really do, and you guys know I've talked about Adama Sanogo. He's part of the reason I covered the Windy City Bulls this year and did episodes on the G League team. And I do think he can turn into a damn solid center for you. But a starting center and kind of what the Bulls need, a more athletic center that can run with this team, I don't know if he's necessarily going to fit that. Again, I've also learned not to put caps on players, so maybe Adama Sanogo has sown something that the front office thinks, but just kind of what my thinking is in hearing that the Bulls might start considering the trade market for Nikola Vucevic, that may come down to and determined by which center they get in the draft. If the center that they do want falls to them and is there when they select at number 11, most likely we'll see after the lottery. And if that is the case, right, or if the Bulls do get lucky and move up into the top 4, maybe they're looking at Sarr at that point in time, who is somebody who can step in right away and be a starting center for you, pair with Ayo Dosunmu and Kobe White. So, hearing that the Bulls are open to exploring that tells me a lot of things about what the mindset of this team and how much change they really are trying to bring about. And I know it's going to be something a lot of Bulls fans like to hear because I've been seeing you guys talk about we got to move off of Nikola Vucevic this summer. And I've been saying, hey, it's going to be difficult to do that, almost impossible, because you may have to give up draft capital to move on from Vooch. But, maybe AK's find a deal where maybe you're just taking back an extremely bad contract for Nikola Vucevic, but at that point, you're clearing the way for your new center to kind of come in and start right away. Maybe something like that, a shorter term contract, which maybe it's only a 1 year left on that rather than the 2 years left on Nikola Vucevic's deal. So there's a lot of different avenues that it could go if the Bulls are truly focused on moving on from Vooch. And we'll see what that's going to bring about as well. But guys, let me know what you guys think. Still, AK has his mindset on changes. It seems like what we're hearing continues to kind of point towards that direction, that some major changes are happening with the Bulls this season. And we'll see what those changes are going to be. But with that said, I want to continue our player profiles for the season. Today, we're going to do Alex Caruso, and then we're also going to talk about Patrick Williams and Zack LaVine's because they had injury-shortened seasons. We're going to talk about those guys today. We're going to start off with Alex Caruso. Now, Alex Caruso he talked about this offseason wanting his offense to match his defensive prowess. And in a lot of ways, he did that. On top of playing 71 games, the most of his NBA career, he also shot the three ball for 40.8% from three, the best that he did in career. Also, taking the most threes he's taken in his career at 4.7 three-pointers per game. Alex Caruso is one of the Bulls who came in and did every single thing that he talked about doing. Thrust into the starting role as well, starting 57 out of 71 games that he played this season because of all the injuries that the Chicago Bulls dealt with. And in that time, 10 points per game that he scored on that, 46% shooting from overall from the field, which is also a career best for him, taking 7.5 shots per game, 4.7 of those, as we talked about, being three-pointers. So he primarily shot out on the free throw line. The three-point line as well. He added into that almost 4 rebounds per game, 3.5 assists per game, one block per game as a guard, and over a steal and a half per game as well. Alex Caruso's defense and offense, that was out on display for the Chicago Bulls, and he made a big impact for this team. There's no doubts about that. There's no really other ways of talking around that. He had a big season for the Bulls, and he was really solid. Post All-Star break as well, his shooting took a bit of a step down overall from the field, but his three-point shooting took a step up. 42% from three-point range after the All-Star break, taking 5.5 three-pointers per game. He shot the ball 40% from three prior to the All-Star break, taking 4.5 three-pointers per game. So almost an extra three-pointer per game after the All-Star break that he shot the ball for the Bulls. So listen, Alex Caruso, we know the impact that he has and that he can make, right? And being a player that brings it both offensively and defensively this season for the Chicago Bulls was definitely huge. We knew that, when he was in the game, the energy was different. The atmosphere was different. He really helped change and set the tone in a lot of games defensively for the Chicago Bulls, getting deflections, things like that, right? And Alex Caruso is just one of those players that just gets stuff done. And that's why when Bulls fans say things like Alex Caruso is a luxury. You got some Bulls fans, like Montez, for example, will say things like, well, Alex Caruso isn't good. And it's like, what are you looking at? Because you're not watching actual basketball games. Alex Caruso has a huge impact on the game for the Chicago Bulls. And when you look at it, when he's off the court, the Bulls are 3.2 worse offensive rating when Alex Caruso is not in the game for the Chicago Bulls. That just is what it is. The stats and the analytics are there. They're a better defensive team. They get more steals. They get more blocks. They shoot a better field goal percentage when Alex Caruso is on the court as well for the Bulls. Caruso is absolutely the type of player that impacts winning. And I said it before. We did a roundtable discussion over on Chi-Town Sports Central, that YouTube page, when we do those once a week roundtable discussions. And I said over there that Alex Caruso impacts impacts winning just as much as DeMar DeRozan does. But he doesn't do it through just offense, right? DeMar DeRozan impacts winning through how he's able to craft, the points he's able to score, the effectiveness he does in scoring those difficult shots and getting to the free throw line. Alex Caruso impacts it mainly with defense. He did it this season as well with this three-point shooting. He brought every single bit of that. And so Alex Caruso, to me, is a player that he's going to get one of the rare A's in the season. He stayed healthy for the most part. He's going to be in contention for all defensive first team this year. Let's hope that he makes it. Alex Caruso came in, and because of his action matching his words, right? What he talked about that he wanted to do for this Bulls team, he did it, and he did it in spades for this team, and definitely was a player that when you watch these games for the Bulls, you cannot deny the impact on winning that Alex Caruso brings to this team night in and night out. And so he gets a solid A for me. Were there times down the stretches of games where I wish he would have shot the ball better? Absolutely, right? Were there times during, the end of games where we couldn't get inbounds plays and things like that, and he was the inbound man? Yeah, that happened as well. He's not a perfect player by any stretch of the imagination, and just like everybody on this team, he had his hand in some of the things that caused this Bulls team to lose games as well, right? And so, for that, you got to also review that fairly, but Alex Caruso, per the contract as well, when you look at the contract that he's on, a little over $6 million per year for Alex Caruso, he's more than outlived that contract. But that leads us into the thing where it comes to this, where a lot of Bulls fans are asking, is Alex Caruso somebody that we should be looking to move to recoup assets if the Bulls can truly get those two? And I said $6 million is actually in a $9.8 million deal. Let me correct myself there. But asking, should the Bulls really be more so considering moving on from Alex Caruso, mainly because of we need assets back to this team. You need change made. Here's the thing. Alex Caruso is a player to me that if you still plan on trying to compete at all, right, and even if you do move on from two of the big three, like Vaughn asked for before, I think Alex Caruso needs to stay on this roster. Now, if the Bulls do move him in a deal that you're clearly getting what you want back for it, I'm not going to be mad at it. But Alex Caruso is a player that I do think helps set identity. I think that he helps set the expectations. I think that he helps impacting winning. And so because of those things and the deal that he's on, I would love for Alex Caruso to stay here if the Bulls can work out a contract extension. But that's where it becomes a little bit more interesting, is the fact that can they work out a contract extension? Will Alex Caruso re-sign with the Chicago Bulls? We haven't heard anything to the contrary with that. We haven't even heard that the Bulls have even started contract discussions with Alex Caruso, which they can do this offseason. And I guess we'll see. But Alex Caruso, to me, is the type of guy that if he wants to be here, you keep him here. He helps set identity. He helps set tone. He helps set culture. And we'll see if that's the way that the Bulls view it as well. I hope that they do, because I really think and view Alex Caruso that highly on this Bulls team, and the way that he can help guide and set that example for a lot of the young players on this team of sacrifice. Because one thing Alex Caruso does is he sacrifices. Some people would say he may sacrifice his body a little too much, and that's why he always ends up injured, right? On the injury report for over a third of the season, even though he played more games than not. But, that comes down to the way that Alex Caruso is willing, able, and consistently sacrifices his body for the Chicago Bulls team. So, we'll end up seeing what happens and what comes of that. I hope that Alex Caruso stays around on the team, but I can also understand the Bulls fans that do have the mindset of, hey, if those 2 first-round picks are out there for Caruso, you'd be crazy not to do it, especially if you're not going to extend him to a contract. And that's where it gets a little bit more in the weeds, so to say, when it comes to Alex Caruso, and not such a clear-cut decision. Is he going to take a contract extension with the Chicago Bulls? And then what does that contract extension look like? Because you're not getting him sub $10 million again. If you re-sign Alex Caruso, it's going to be between 10 $10, $12, $15 million, somewhere up in there with the way that he performs. And the Bulls have to ask themselves, what's that value then that it brings back, that value aspect of Alex Caruso's deal? So let me know what you guys think, though. What do you grade Alex Caruso's season for the Chicago Bulls? What also, how do you view his future with the Bulls? Do you want to see the Bulls sign him to a contract extension? Or are you on the other side of that where you like to see the Chicago Bulls look to move Alex Caruso, especially if they can get back, those 2 first-round picks that have been rumored that what the Bulls are coveting in a potential Alex Caruso deal? Let me know all that down below. Next up, though, we're going to review the seasons for Patrick Williams and Coby White. And Patrick Williams and Zack LaVine. And this is going to be one that I can't wait to see how you guys respond to this. But with that said, we're going to start off with Zack LaVine. And Zack LaVine, it's kind of a difficult way to kind of grade Zack LaVine's season, right? Because, the biggest grade to give there is disappointment. And mainly disappointed because he wasn't able to stay on the basketball court, because there are going to be questions that Bulls fans have on, like, what would Zack LaVine had looked like next to this version of Coby White? Would he fit in over the course of the season? Would he found a way to really fit in with this new play style, with the team playing faster? All things that theoretically go into his game. One of the things that I talked about in my review on DeMar DeRozan yesterday was that DeMar started off on cold shooting just like Zack LaVine, but he had the time to work himself out of it, and then he adapted as best he could to the new play style of the Chicago Bulls, even at times deferring to Io and to Coby White. But then there's times where you can look at it and say, well, would Zack LaVine have even deferred? Right now, of course, there are those games that we saw where he was doing more facilitating, not really shooting the ball, things like that, right? And, some people criticized him for that. And, 19.5 points per game, which is the lowest total that he's had since the 2017-18 season, where he only played 24 games. He only played 25 this season, right? Shooting the ball 45% from the field, down 3% from the year prior. Shooting the ball 34.9%, so 35% from three-point range. Shooting the ball about 3% worse than last season as well, right? 5.2 rebounds per game, which is good for him. 3.9 assists per game in that time as well, and right under a steal per game, which is basically what he's averaged for his career. Zack LaVine's season was an incomplete, right? Is that even when he came back from his initial injury and you had hope, like, okay, is Zack LaVine going to fit in? He's going to do this. He's going to do that. It didn't really happen for Zack last season. It just didn't, right? He did average for the month of November over 20 points per game in that, shooting the ball 45% from the field, 33% from three-point range. But it just was we never really got to see Zack LaVine get going. Now, and get in rhythm. And yeah, the slow start, you still absolutely look at him and you got to blame him for that, of course, right? Things like that, that's on him. But at the same time, that the way that the team went, the defensive prowess that this team started showing with Io and him getting into rhythm, things like that, what would that have looked like had Zack LaVine not went down? But when it's all said and done, I can't judge him by what did not happen. I can only judge him by what did happen, right? And he shot the ball, the worst true shooting percentage of his career, well, since 2019-20, where it was 56.8%, 57% true shooting percentage. He was over 60% the 3 seasons prior to that. So the worst shooting performance that he's had in 5 years, right? On that. Usage rate was 23, was down a lot from last season, which was 27 from last season. But ultimately, when it came down to it, the Bulls are just a better team without Zack LaVine on the court. And even though there are some deniers to that, right, which I don't understand, when the Bulls are clearly played over 500 ball without Zack LaVine this year, and the ball did move around a little bit more freely, you still got to put that in, ask, okay, well, what portion of that is on the coaching staff to make sure that they bring in a culture here where everybody sacrifices. The Bulls had a negative 5.2 offensive rating with Zack LaVine on the court. It's just bad. It was not good. And so, when you pair into that with Zack LaVine having the highest paid contract in Chicago Bulls history, which, that's the front office did give that to him. The fact that he has 3 years left on that deal of well over $150 million left on that time as well. And the fact that, there is those questions around Zack LaVine being able to stay healthy. There are those questions about how much does Zack LaVine impact winning. And those came via this team playing better and having a better win percentage without Zack LaVine on the court. And so it's a lot of what ifs for Zack LaVine's season, because what if he did work himself out of that slump, and then what would that Bulls team had looked like, right? In no way is everything that the Bulls went through on Zack LaVine, and I hate that a lot of Bulls fans try to make it this all or nothing thing where everything's blamed on Zack LaVine, because it's not. It's a lot of things on this team that are fundamentally wrong with the structure of this team that have nothing to do with Zack LaVine. And Zack LaVine already drew a lot of criticism from Bulls fans, rightfully so. Once you sign the richest contract in Chicago Bulls history, that's going to come with its fair share of criticism and expectations on what you need to live up for. And for that credit on that, Zack LaVine talked about how that deal made him want to step up his game. He couldn't rest on that. And it doesn't seem like that's actually what we got. Now, we live in an era of basketball where basketball players sign their contract and then ask for trades later. They secure their money. And maybe that is what Zack LaVine did. And now it's up to the Chicago Bulls to do right and to figure it out and maybe move Zack LaVine, but they don't owe Zack LaVine anything in that they owe this franchise something. So we'll see what comes all of that. At the end of the day, Zack LaVine's season, I can't give it anything above a D because it was a bunch of disappointment when it came down to Zack LaVine. His inability to stay healthy, his performance when he was on the court, the performance of the team, which is not all on him, but that's all associated with while he was on the court for this team. And so for that, you got to give Zack LaVine a D. Again, that's not that I think that he can't perform much better than that because I know that he can, and I know he can impact things more and better than what he did last season. And maybe a change up of the roster is what's needed. And maybe that can put Zack LaVine in a better situation, a better place, whether it's here or somewhere else. And we'll see what happens with that. But the other player that missed a lot of time, even though, he played almost double the games that Zack LaVine did, is Patrick Williams, only playing 43 games this season. It was another inconsistent season where Patrick Williams came into the season as the starter and eventually lost the starting role, ended up taking it back, played really well in December. I got to give him credit. That month of December is the month that Patrick Williams needs to look at that month and figure out how to do that. Make that be what his season is next year. The month of December for Pat, 14.1 points per game. He did that on 52% shooting from the field, 50% shooting from three-point range, still taking his 10 shots per game, right? A lot we talk about the fact that Pat only takes 10 shots per game, but he got 14 points out of that, 5 rebounds basically, basically 2 assists, 1.9, right under a block, right under a steal, and by under I mean 0.9 per game. If Patrick Williams can have a full season of averaging 14 points on 50% shooting, 5 to 6 he's a power forward. If he's going to play power forward, I would ideally like to see that at least at 7 rebounds. But again, he plays away from the basket. But having at least 5 to 7 rebounds per game, 2 assists, and a steal and a block per game, I'll take that from Patrick Williams. Does that mean he's living up to the hype of being the 4th overall pick in the draft? No, and I don't think he ever will. Again, maybe that's just me safeguarding myself. That expectations for me has come and gone. But it's, again, much like Zack LaVine, it's a season of disappointment for Pat. And Pat understands that, and he needs to be the one most disappointed by his performance so he can come out and play better because we need Patrick Williams to play better. And maybe a change of play style in that month of December when the Bulls were playing with a faster pace. The ball was moving around a little bit more, right? He wasn't hesitating as much, not thinking as much during that time. Maybe Pat can unlock that. But at this point, I'm not willing to bet on that until I see it consistently from Patrick Williams. So he gets another D from me. And hopefully that, Patrick Williams in whatever, because this front office is giving him another contract, he's able to really unlock it and motivate himself to come out here and play with the mindset that we need Patrick Williams to play. We know he has the physical attributes. We know he has the ability to. It's just that Patrick Williams doesn't have the mental capacity right now. He's not shown that to make an impact consistently for an NBA team, and then hopefully he finds a way to do that. But that's my thought. You guys can let me know whether you agree or disagree with my grades there, the 3 players we graded today. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.